So it goes without saying that if HR teams want to do things differently, then we're dependent upon leaders trying new approaches. So, for example, facilitating peer reviews rather than just telling their teams how they're performing, holding open conversations instead of giving someone a grade, or owning decisions about pay and reward. But when we ask them to set aside broken processes and attempt something new and often unproven, then we ask them to put their confidence, reputation, and self-esteem on the line, and that's pretty scary. So how can you persuade them to give it a try? Well, first up, every successful change starts with a story. Many HR people I know worry about not having enough data to convince senior executives to engage with them. And it's true, many leaders in finance and operations are a highly analytical, logical bunch who require the backup of figures to convince them of an argument. So I'm not saying that data is irrelevant, but I think we give it a higher level of importance than it merits. Even the most analytical person needs a story to feel inspired, and it's this that makes the difference. Stories excite our imagination and our emotions, whereas facts just tend to wake up our inner cynic rather than inspiring action. So what's the change story you're using to engage your audience? Secondly, be smart about how you use data. For some leaders, a competitor analysis is what will make them sit up and take notice. For others, it could be based on the time wasted by current systems and processes and the impact of these on customers. We have to find the data that works for them and to only use one or two key facts to reinforce our point. When Deloitte wrote its well-known article in the Harvard Business Review, in which it quoted the 2 million annual hours spent on its performance management system, this was clearly the nugget that had grabbed the attention of people in a business that sells hours. So data can be a driver for change, but you only need one or two powerful statistics. Think of it as shock and awe data. The one fact that will make the difference. Thirdly, understand the people you are trying to convince. Picture the person or function that you will predict will be the most challenging to convince of the need to do things differently. How do you envisage winning them over? When we craft one set of messages about change that attempts to work for all people, it's bound to fail. And yet so often that's exactly what we do. I'm sure you've been on the receiving end of those types of communications and you switch off because it just doesn't feel relevant to you. Each leader will have their own attitude, experiences, fears and motivations, and we should be taking them into account. If we're serious about crafting messages that work, we need to dig deeper into their needs. You can borrow the marketing technique of customer persona and identify 2 or 3 leadership persona to help you focus on a small range of different messages that work for the different personalities and different attitudes that you're working with. And finally, break the change down into smaller chunks. If we can find a way to make something seem small or even temporary, we'll find it easier to persuade people to do it. Getting going is often the hardest part of change because it feels so daunting. But anyone can accomplish something useful in 5 minutes and do it again the next day. Our confidence grows as we discover it's not so difficult after all, and we want to do some more of it. And we can use this approach in HR when we want leaders to change their habits. Instead of asking leaders to have continuous conversations with their staff each day, which sounds really daunting and frankly exhausting, we could suggest that they have one weekly 5-minute conversation with a couple of their people by their desk and to comment on one good thing that they've done that week. So create a compelling change story, support with shock and awe data, craft the messaging for each individual, and make the changes seem much smaller and easier to achieve. You'll find this more impactful when persuading leaders to try something new. Hi, and thanks for watching. If you found it useful, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications to get more videos like this.